The left is beginning to implode. It seems as if they've entered a self-destruct mode of sorts, and hopefully after what's likely to be a long process of severe growing pains, something new and better can blossom from their ashes. But one thing is for certain. There will be ashes. It's quite rare you're granted the opportunity to witness a political party gaslight themselves to such a degree, instead of any level of accountability and acknowledgement that policy, rhetoric, and the matters of actual substance are what's responsible for their catastrophic failure in this past election. I've instead seen the blame game, finger pointing, excuses, and copium.
Black voters came through for Kamala Harris. White women voters did not.
I just say, Rev, really quickly, too. Democrats need to be mature, and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men, things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States. A lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates.
Right.
A lot
and
of,
with other Hispanics. You've got some that don't like each other. And some of the most misogynist things I've heard going on this Get Out the Vote tour came from black men. I mean, misogynist things. So you're absolutely right. It's not simplistic.
Let's be honest about this, okay? Let's be absolutely blunt about it. There were appeals to racism in this campaign, and there is racial bias in this country, and there is sexism in this country. And anybody who thinks that that did not in any way impact on the outcome of this race is wrong.
Can you imagine a woman of color acting like Donald Trump acted, even for one day?
How many times do we have to say this? People should not be expected to think or act a certain way because of their race or ethnicity. Democrats, you are not entitled to the Latino vote. You are not entitled to the black vote. Attacking and further alienating those who've simply exercised their freedom of thought and right to vote for whoever they wish is only going to hurt you in the long run. These puppets are literally talking about these different communities as if they're all just pieces on their political board and not actual human beings with their own individuality and unique perspectives on things. Not every black or Latino person thinks the exact same and will arrive at the same points of view you have arrived at given their own unique life experiences. Why? Because black people are not a monolith. Latino people are not a monolith. They're not all one big hive mind that shares the same thoughts and opinions amongst each other about everything. In other words, they can think for themselves as individuals. So stop trying to do the thinking and speaking for them and then getting upset when they finally decide that they've had enough and that they wish to think and speak for themselves. It is precisely this behavior and rhetoric right here that is going to cost the Democrats the next election. I am telling you now. The left is losing ground, and instead of trying to reclaim it through accountability, self-reflection, and the acknowledgement of their failures, they're instead using their lost ground to chastise those who've dissented, and they're building a moat through that lost ground so that those who've left shall never return. And I find it quite ironic how those on the left have criticized Trump incessantly for supposedly being racist, yet he's managed to garner a historic amount of minority votes as a Republican candidate, and the left is currently the side who's been weaponizing identity for over a decade now.
What is the lesson that your party should have learned?
Well, the Democratic Party worked very hard, and they raised, substantial sum of money. We had great candidates, and so Trump had a following, basically generally led by whites. White males voted in big numbers. He had a few from the other race groups that joined in, like the Latinos at 45%, and black men at about the same rate that they did when they voted for him before, at about 20%. That combination won. And so it is not that Democrats did not work hard, did not do a great job. We had an unusual situation where we had a black woman, which this country has never seen before. A combination of all of those things led to his win.
I will not push back on the idea that race and sex matter in American politics. I think they do. I don't know that it was the controlling variable, and you don't suggest otherwise. To me, it seemed to be that the Democrats thought Trump stinks is enough. And Senator Bernie Sanders said something that reminded me of you, which is why I wanted you on the show tonight, Maxine, which is Democratic Party used to be, we are all about doing for working people. That's what we do. That's what Mario Cuomo's party, that's what Maxine Waters' party was. You are now seen as not that, even by Bernie Sanders.
Ah, yes, because God forbid it have anything to do with her lack of clear messaging, horrid policies, constantly dodging questions the American people demanded answers for, lack of appeal to any side of the political spectrum, aside from folks who just don't like Trump, association with arguably one of the most embarrassing presidential administrations in American history, leaning too heavily on moral appeals in identity politics, relying too heavily on celebrity endorsements, and backing institutions that most American people would deem as failed institutions, and so on and so on. No, if you didn't cast your vote for Kamala Harris, it was simply because you are misogynistic. I mean, that would surely explain the overwhelming amount of women who voted against her as well, right? Because that totally makes sense. Yeah, no. See, this is the type of bullshit everybody is tired of, and this is the reason y'all lost so hard. Like, this is the problem. Like, these buzzwords, they're losing meaning. They don't mean anything anymore. You're just saying anything, and it hardly ever makes any sense. Everything these people talk about revolves around identity. They have nothing else. There's zero substance to any of this, and this is why they failed so horribly and will continue to do so. They've seemingly learned nothing from the results. I mean, you lost the popular vote for the first time in 20 years. Do you really not suspect that there may have been a fundamental and strategic misstep of any kind at play, and that the American populace is unanimously rejecting not the race or sex of your candidate, but the ideas that they represent? Are we really going to gaslight ourselves into thinking that this has nothing to do with bad ideas, bad policy, and a blindness to the current values of our country, and instead everything to do with just identity? I mean, Obama was black. He won the popular vote. Hillary Clinton was a woman and she won the popular vote. You mean to tell me that only just suddenly everybody has a big issue here? These factors didn't seem to affect the past, so why suddenly would they play the ultimate deciding role now? How about we work on our inner flaws and issues rather than dumping $1 billion into a totally astroturfed candidate that nobody even liked to begin with, which is why she dropped out of the 2020 primaries early on and completely skipped the primaries in 2024 to be sneakily wedged in as president-elect, even though the people didn't vote for her to be in that position, and the members of her own party didn't want her to be in that position either.
What I see right now, and I want you all to know, is that over the last several weeks, there have been lots of Democrats who have been giving little anonymous quotes to the press, to some journalists, to print, and I'm not here to knock the press on it. I'm here to knock my colleagues on it. Then there was recently a quote-unquote senior Democratic leader that said, I'm just resigning myself to a Trump victory. Leave your seat. Leave. And I'm going to say what a lot of these folks aren't saying. I'm just going to say it. If you think that there is consensus among the people who want Joe Biden to leave, that they will support Vice President Harris, you would be mistaken. And I'm going to say that because if they're going to come out and say all their little things on background off the record, but they're not going to be fully honest, I'm going to be honest for them. I'm in these rooms. I see what they say in conversations. A lot of them are not just interested in removing the president. They are interested in removing the whole ticket.
Now look, I'm not on the right or the left. I have no horses in this race, and I welcome all valid criticisms towards both sides. But one thing I've seen, it's kind of a silly thing, but one thing I've been seeing going around on my last video is people saying that Trump somehow bought his way into the White House. But according to this article in Forbes, Harris outraised Trump 5-1. The Harris campaign raised $1 billion and the Trump campaign raised $388 million. So that's a completely ridiculous narrative. And actually, if anybody was trying to pay to win here, it was Harris. Whether you like it or not, the machine lost this time. Many on the left claim to be against the machine, but its inner mechanizations have finally been proven faulty this time around. And this should be a good thing, but I'm not seeing much much glee. It's almost as if they're upset that a totally unpopular candidate amongst the American people couldn't just buy their way into the White House, which is precisely what they were trying to do. I mean, these are very strange times. Personally, I think our institutions and our government need to be completely exposed. A purge must commence amongst these organizations in order to restructure them or create new and better alternatives. And look, I don't know if the orange man is going to be the one to pull it all off, and it's very likely that this vision will never come to fruition. But this is something that resonates with a lot of people who feel like our current institutions, systems, and organizations are inadequate. And the folks on the right seem to be the only ones really promising to change it, or at least creating discussions about changing it to some degree, such with phrases like drain the swamp. There are many things about the right that I myself do not align with, but this is something that resonates with me deeply and that speaks to my values. This is something I stand for. I think our government and our institutions are so absurdly corrupt and have failed at their jobs, and I take great pleasure in witnessing their days of judgment and exposure. We need somebody who will serve as a wrecking ball to the current regime, and not somebody who is promising to uphold the status quo, because thus far, this has done nothing but hurt our country and our people. I'd love to see the left embody this idea more, but that would mean that they would have to bite the very hand that feeds them. But we will see what happens. The left needs to start discussing real issues, and not just issues that attract the most attention and outrage on Twitter. Real issues that impact average Americans. And until they do, I suspect that if Trump were to do an even half decent job these next 4 years, we'd be looking at another 4 years of Republican presidency. And if that candidate were to do a decent job, I could easily see another 4 years even after that. These are dark times for the Democrats, and they need to get their shit together before they fall so far behind that the process of catching back up will all rely on a catastrophic fuck up by the right or over a decade's worth of grueling work in reputation repair. Enough with chalking the loss up to anything but that of substance in order to deflect or dodge confronting the fact that your rhetoric, policies, and ideas are simply unpopular. The American populace is looking for a massive change, a wrecking ball type figure to destroy what we currently have and build anew. Trump in many ways is representative of defiance and anti-status quo. Many people resonate with this, and the left is failing to produce such a figure. These are my observations.